Hey guys, and welcome back to the Dart Only Challenge. In the previous episode, I managed to beat pre-hard mode using only dart weapons, so if you haven't seen that yet, I'd recommend going and checking it out. But with that out of the way, let's get on to today's video. When it comes to the dart subclass, pre-hard mode really doesn't have much to offer. You basically have to use the poison darts, and the weapons available are pretty bad. Once you get into hard mode though, you gain access to 2 powerful ammo types and 1 of 2 new weapons depending on your world type. So with this in mind, my first objective moving forward was upgrading my arsenal. To start, I traveled over to the Crimson to smash some altars in order to spawn hard mode ore that I would be able to use to craft new armor. With this ore now scattered across my world, I next went on a pickaxe upgrading spree until in the end I could mine adamantite ore. Once I had collected enough ore to craft armor, my next objective was obtaining the dart pistol, so I returned to the caves, this time to collect souls of night that I would be able to use to summon a crimson mimic. When the time came to fight the mimic, I initially had some difficulties, but thanks to my new armor and darts, victory was narrowly achieved. And to my delight, the first mimic slain actually dropped the weapon I was after. To finish off my early hard mode upgrades, I began to farm pixies and wyverns to collect the valuable materials that they drop, and once I had a nice stockpile of these items, I crafted myself a pair of pixie wings, greatly enhancing my mobility and giving me the confidence I needed to fight the first mech boss. As darkness surrounded me, I knew the time had come, so I grabbed a mechanical skull and initiated my fight with Prime. Using my brand new pistol, I covered the boss in the Ichor debuff, allowing me to deal more damage with my subsequent shots. As I quickly realized, because of the way that the Ichor darts work, I was able to deal more damage in close proximity to the boss. So, anytime that Prime got close to me, I made sure to get in as many shots as I could to deal the most damage possible. As the battle raged on, I began to target Prime's laser arm because it posed the greatest threat to me, and once I had succeeded in destroying this extremity, things were not looking good for the boss. With his best defense taken out, Prime didn't stand much of a chance, and before long, I had defeated him, claiming my first treasure bag in hard mode. Seeing how successful I was against Prime, I decided that I was already ready for the twins, so after a good day's rest, I returned to my arena and spawned them to face me. Because of the way the twins follow you, during the first phase, they stayed at perfect range for my darts to deal maximum damage, so as you could probably guess, I made quick work of their health. Although I did deal damage to both of them at this point, I made sure to primarily target Spaz, hoping to take him out before Retinizer entered phase 2. Seeing how powerful my weapon was, Spaz blew off his fleshy exterior and began charging at me with his newly exposed mouth wide open. Although this was quite menacing, it was hardly effective, and before long I had defeated the first twin. Now alone with Retinizer, I finally started to target him, and without much resistance, soon he too entered his more dangerous second phase. Using his rapid fire laser, Retinizer tried his hardest to drive me away, but it was no use. With a few more shots from my pistol, I struck down the boss and claimed my second treasure bag. Although the souls that they dropped were not much use for me at this point in time, the hollowed bars that I had gotten from the 2 bosses was enough to craft a new set of armor, so that's exactly what I did. Knowing that the final mech boss I had to face was the Destroyer, I decided that I wanted to swap out my ammo for crystal darts, as these have piercing capabilities, which I hoped would come in handy for the worm. After collecting up a bunch of crystal shards and crafting them into darts, I was just about ready for the boss, but before I could fight him, a solar eclipse began, providing me with a new challenge to overcome. After a long day of fighting, the solar eclipse finally faded away, and after surveying my inventory, I realized that I had gotten a broken bat wing, so using some extra souls of flight that I had available to me, I crafted up a new pair of wings. With this bonus improvement now acquired, I felt extra ready for the Destroyer, so without wasting any more time, I summoned the boss. The unique ability of the crystal darts bouncing between enemies provided me with a good way of dealing with the probes that spawned from the Destroyer, but even with this advantage, I still took quite a bit of damage from all of the different oncoming attacks. Still, as the fight dragged on, I continued to take out more and more of the probes that were spawning. With his defenses dwindling, the Destroyer had no way of avoiding my crystal dart attacks, and before long, the fight was over. Now that I had defeated the mechanical trio, it was time to take a trip to the jungle and face Plantera. But before I could battle the planty monster, I first had to prepare an arena. So, using the area that I had already cleared for the queen bee fight in the previous episode, I began to excavate a large chamber in which I would be able to fight. Once this massive task was finally completed, I was ready for my battle, so I smashed a nearby Plantera bulb, angering the boss enough to come out of of hiding and face me. As the battle began, I lured the boss to the center of my arena and began circling her while dishing out massive damage. Using the power of my Ichor darts, I made quick work of Plantera's first phase. But that was the easy part. Not wanting to go down without a fight, Plantera unleashed her horde of high damaging vines in order to protect herself while continuing to chase me. Knowing the danger that I was in, I tried my best to stay away from the boss while continuing to pelt her with darts. Fortunately, my evading proved to be effective, and before long, even with her best efforts, Plantera was defeated. With the head plant no longer posing a threat to my world, I could now get the truffle NPC to sell me an auto hammer, allowing me to craft shroomite bars. Unfortunately, none of the 3 shroomite helmets provided direct damage upgrade to the darts that I was using, because I don't think that it's intended that you continue to use dart weapons this late into the game. But regardless, the shroomite armor is still an upgrade over any other ranger set available to me, so even without the damage boost of the helmet, I decided to craft it anyways. First, I set off to collect a bunch of glowing mushrooms. Then, I returned to the jungle and mined up a bunch of chlorophyte ore to combine into shroomite bars. Once I had enough, I made myself the final upgrade to my armor before facing the endgame bosses. Now protected by the power of mushrooms, I entered the jungle temple and began to work my way through, disarming the traps and fighting monsters along the way. Once I reached the end, I began to prepare the chamber for my inevitable fight with the golem. Once I felt ready, I approached the altar and inserted a power core. As the final boss of the temple arrived, I began to target his deadly fists, hoping to take them out of commission early, and before long I was successful in this task. Angered by the destruction of his extremities, Golem began firing lasers in addition to the fireballs that already threatened me. And as if this wasn't enough, in another attempt to stop me, Golem's head detached and began flying around the room, continuing to fire lasers. Knowing that I couldn't last forever in this chamber of death, I gave everything that I had into damaging the boss as quickly as possible, and thanks to the power of my new armor, in the end I managed to come out victorious. As the dust settled, I collected my loot and began to prepare for my upcoming fight with the lunar cult. After purchasing a final upgrade to my wings from the steampunker, I began to make my way towards the dungeon. Once I arrived, the cultists were already waiting for me, and with my interruption of their ritual, the cult leader prepared to face me. My battle with the lunatic cultist started off shaky as I accidentally attacked an illusion, prompting the boss to summon an ice dragon to aid him in battle. Fortunately for me though, I did manage to take out this beast, but it was not easy, so I made sure not to make this mistake again. Because of the cultist's small size and quick movements, it was actually quite hard for me to deal sufficient damage to him with my darts. So although I continued to dodge his attacks, the fight actually dragged on for far longer than I would have liked. In the end, however, I managed to defeat the cultist, initiating the lunar invasion in my world. Half excited and half dreading my fight with Moonlord, I began to take out the lunar pillars one by one. But before destroying the final one, I decided to make some last-minute preparations for my fight with the lunar boss, including gathering life fruit and crafting potions. Once I felt ready, I took down the final pillar and waited for impending doom to arrive. As the battle began, I immediately started using the same tactics that worked when I beat Moonlord with a Zapinator not long ago. By traveling back and forth and targeting the top eye primarily, I was able to slowly chip away at the boss's health while avoiding the majority of his deadly attacks. Something else that I learned from the Zapinator challenge is that this process takes an extremely long time, so I made sure to bring multiple buff potions, allowing me to reapply them during the fight. After numerous minutes of repeating this same tactic, I managed to get all 3 eyes down to about 2,000 health, so I decided that it was finally time to destroy them. Once the final eye was removed, the core was exposed, and the final stretch of the fight began. As I continued to chip away at the core's health, I became increasingly nervous that I would make a mistake and the fight would end in defeat. But as the core approached destruction, it became clear to me that victory was possible. With just a fraction of its health remaining, I made one final push to deal as much damage as possible, and to my surprise, it worked, and I managed to defeat the Moonlord with just a dart pistol. After watching the credits roll, I returned to my base, satisfied with another completed challenge. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to keep up to date with my uploads in the future. And if you're interested in a different video style, I recently created a second channel where my friend has been making videos out of my live streams. There'll be a link in the description if you want to check it out. But with that out of the way, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you to Beav Notice Me Senpai and all my other patrons for helping make this video possible.